Who invented the computer? Or rather, who invented the electronic computer? I know every Iowa resident immediately jumped to the comment box. It's a Tanasoff, it's a Tanasoff. Yes, but how did it get to be that way? Why does asking who invented the computer invoke a never-ending spat over the computer's true inventor? Let's start by setting up our key players. We have the aforementioned John Vincent Atanasoff, as well as John Mauchly and John Presper Eckert. Atanasoff was born in 1903 in New York. He developed a fascination with calculating devices after being given a slide rule by his father. This led him to explore various methods of calculation which would later help him in his work with the Atanasoff-Berry computer, or ABC. In 1930, he began working for the University of Iowa. By choosing to go to Iowa State instead of somewhere like Harvard, Atanasoff was essentially on his own in terms of computers. There weren't really that many people with high levels of expertise to help him overcome engineering or technical problems or that type of thing. He developed his ideas by himself, though he worked with the electrical engineer Clifford Berry, the B in ABC, to actually build the machine. Atanasoff identified that calculating devices fell into two categories, analog and digital. The term digital wasn't used until later. Atanasoff called them computing machines proper. Analog is continuous, digital is not. Think of a video game controller. Analog is a joystick, being able to send varied information such as speed, pressure, and specific direction, whereas digital is the buttons on the D-pad, on or off. Inspired by slide rules, Atanasoff developed several analog calculators, the last of which being in 1936, where he realized that analog computing devices depended heavily on the quality of the parts. Because analog sends continuous information, even small idiosyncrasies in the machine can send altered results. In the winter of 1937, in a roadhouse somewhere in Illinois, Atanasoff came up with the key principles of the ABC. It would use electricity and electronics, a base 2 number system, regenerative memory, and computation through direct logical action, logical rules being directly translated to physical actions. Atanasoff's machine wasn't actually programmable, differentiating it from other machines at the time. It also wasn't fully electronic. It still had some mechanical parts. It was also Turing incomplete. It couldn't simulate other computational devices or do any other programs, besides what it was designed for, solving linear equations. Atanasoff coined the term memory to refer to the way that computers stored numbers. Charles Babbage, arguably the inventor of the initial computer, used the term store, which Atanasoff says he would have adopted had he known of it. An interesting detail to note is that Atanasoff specifically picked the word memory because of its connection to the brain, which is a recurring pattern in computing because brains are essentially computers. Anyway, there were a couple of different methods the ABC could have used to store its data. Vacuum tubes would have been the most efficient, but they were also the most expensive, so Atanasoff used capacitors. That specific term wasn't actually in use, instead he called them condensers, as his memory system. They'd eventually lose their charge, and so he figured that by putting them in rotating drums, he could recharge them. The use of rotating drums also allowed for regenerative memory. With each rotation, data could be retrieved and then stored when necessary. Though the ABC was still about 10 times faster than doing calculations by hand, use of capacitors greatly slowed the speed of the machine and limited it to the speed at which the drum could rotate. The logic components of the machine were fully electronic, however, and used vacuum tubes to perform Boolean mathematics. In 1941, Mauchly visited Atanasoff and learned of the ABC. This visit would later become really highly contested, but during the visit, Mauchly brought his son along, which Atanasoff's wife wasn't happy about. Later on, she also said that she thought that Mauchly wasn't trustworthy. Okay, later on, Mauchly said that he became disinterested upon finding out that Atanasoff's machine was never fully operational. Atanasoff was then forced to abandon working on the ABC in 1942 due to the ongoing war. Speaking of World War II, to ensure accuracy for ballistics, firing tables were often used. A bullet is going to travel differently depending on the weather, air pressure, terrain, etc. Firing tables contain information such as the specific angle needed to hit a target at a specified distance using a projectile of a specified weight, accounting for external conditions. These were important and had to be calculated by hand, which was a tedious and time-consuming process. In 1941, John Mauchly devised a potential device for making these calculations quickly, and in 1943, the United States Ballistic Research Laboratory funded the Electrical Numerical Integrator and Computer, or the ENIAC, designed by John Presper Eckert and John Mauchly. Mauchly was born in 1907 in Ohio before moving to Maryland. He attended Johns Hopkins University, where he switched from studying engineering to physics. After finishing his education, he taught at the University of Pennsylvania, where he met the graduate student J. Presper Eckert. Eckert was born in 1919 and met Mauchly at the Moore School of Electrical Engineering in 1941. Mauchly and Eckert worked well as a pair. Mauchly had a lot of experience working on the conceptualizations of the machine, and Eckert had the engineering experience to have it come to light. The ENIAC was dedicated to the University of Pennsylvania and had a large team of engineers and programmers working on it in addition to Eckert and Mauchly. Ideas flowed between members of the team, and extreme precision was taken to ensure that the machine worked properly. Eckert was known to micromanage the construction of the computer. The ENIAC was not binary, instead using a decimal system, 10-digit counters. by counting the pulses and looping back around whenever 10 had been released, it could essentially store information. Through the use of conditional branching, which was using logic to dictate which function gets carried out, they were able to construct subroutines, which are basically just repeating blocks of code, and they were able to have subroutines for subroutines. The finished ENIAC was the size of several rooms put together and had just shy of 17,500 vacuum tubes. By the time it was retired, this number would grow to about 18,000. It was said that whenever it was running, the lights in the surrounding city would flicker. Though the completion of the ENIAC happened just in time for the end of the Second World War, it was a Turing-complete machine. It could be reprogrammed to complete other tasks, though this would take about 2 hours. 2 hours or 2 days? Some amount of time to completely rewire the machine. After the development of the ENIAC, Eckert and Mauchly worked with John von Neumann to develop the Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer, or the EDVAC. Von Neumann published a draft report on the EDVAC, which meant that Eckert and Mauchly couldn't patent it. They did, however, apply for a patent for the ENIAC in June of 1947. After their successes, Eckert and Mauchly formed a corporation, aptly named the Eckert-Mauchly Corporation, which they sold to Remington Rand while they were running out of money working on yet another computer. Remington Rand then became Sperry Rand, which still had all the stuff from the Eckert-Mauchly Corporation. Okay. Though they applied in 1947, it took until 1964 for the United States Patent Office to recognize the duo and issue a patent. This 17-year delay was because IBM and Sperry Rand were engaged in disputes, as IBM said the patent interfered with some of theirs. Eventually, the issue was settled, and the office issued the patent. Once the patent was issued, Sperry Rand demanded royalties from all other major computer corporations. In May of 1967, Sperry Rand sued Honeywell for a patent violation. Honeywell then said that Sperry Rand was trying to enforce a fraudulent patent because they were trying to enforce a patent relating to a mercury decay line memory, but it was essentially getting at regenerative memory, a concept initially used by one Dr. John Vincent Atanasoff. They also claimed that Sperry Rand was trying to establish a monopoly over the computer industry. The Honeywell lawyers told Atanasoff about the case and gave him the patents to look over. Atanasoff determined that Eckert and Mauchly's machine had been conceived from his work. The trial began on June 1, 1971 and ended on March 13, 1972. In those 135 days, a behemoth of a court case ensued. To this day, Honeywell v. Sperry Rand is one of the longest cases in the United States, with a transcript of 20,677 pages. Sperry Rand lost. Their patent was undermined in 4 ways. ENIAC was already in public use for a year before the patent was issued, von Neumann published the EDVAC draft papers, Sperry Rand dragged things out to make more money, and the ideas of Eckert and Mauchly were derived from Atanasoff. This last ruling was arguably the most controversial. So, excluding patent battles, who actually invented the computer? It's important to note that there were several other devices composed during this time. The Colossus, the computer which is responsible for breaking the Enigma code, and Howard Eichen's Mark I. Shout out to Lieutenant Grace Murray Hopper. Truly one of the women of all time. The main difference between these other computers and the ENIAC and the ABC is that the latter machines were mostly, if not entirely, electronic, whereas the former ones were more electromechanical. In terms of sheer timing, Atanasoff could be considered the inventor of the computer. The ABC predates other electronic computers by a substantial amount, and even if it was never fully operational, it laid the foundation for many other computers to come. As impressive as that might be, the ABC fell flat in terms of influence. That is the category where Eckert and Mauchly's ENIAC reigns. The transfer of ideas and application of concepts that worked on and allowed for a successful machine and a wider interest in computing devices. The electronic computer tends to be pointed as an outlier in terms of invention. Most people can very confidently say that it was Alexander Graham Bell who invented the telephone and Thomas Edison who invented the light bulb, but very few could give a single answer for who invented the computer. The inventors earlier listed, however, are also contested. Bell beat Elijah Gray to the patent office by a matter of hours, and Louis Latimer is responsible for all the stuff inside the light bulb. You rarely hear about these other inventors. Maybe that's because there was no patent battle, and people from Iowa don't really get up all up in arms about Louis Latimer. They should, though he's pretty cool. After considering everything, the inventor of the computer could truly be considered to be John. Working on this video, I referenced several 2 book sources, which were the book just titled ENIAC by Scott McCartney and The Inventors by Walter Isaacson. I actually have that one with me right here. This one. Yeah. Okay, and then every other digital source I use will be linked in the description. I unfortunately could not find a proper transcript copy of the Honeywell v. Sperry Rand court files because, again, that case was really long and I don't live anywhere where they have it, and even if I did, I'm not looking through 20 cubic feet of files. Okay, thank you for watching. I think this is a really interesting story. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being.